They are killing us for our language, they are killing us for our culture. And our response should be even more Ukrainian language, even more Ukrainian culture. I think this is the right time for Ukrainian culture. That's why war also gives us such optics of life on some kind of edge where you feel tradition differently. But in fact, wartime art turned out to be a very powerful art. It happens in history.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center, an NGO Euro-Atlantic Course. And I'm your host, Myroslava Yarenki. During the war, Ukrainians were repeatedly reminded that culture is not only about creating meaning in peaceful circumstances, but also about constantly engaging with what is happening here and now. In times of war, with all its terrible manifestations, culture does not distance itself from difficult topics, but continues to be the nerve of society. In 2022, Ukraine's presence in the international arena, particularly in various cultural events, was very limited. However, in 2023 and 2024, a large number of national events returned and started operating offline. Despite all the risks and the war, new art and cultural centers continue to open in Ukraine. In today's episode, we're going to talk about what is happening with Ukrainian culture today, its mission, and how it operates and reacts to wartime challenges. If you want to learn more about the subject, please continue watching this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our videos in the future. From the beginning of the war until today, Ukrainians have expressed their emotions precisely through art and culture. When we are all united by common experiences, reposts of relevant posters and photos spread rapidly through social networks, and each sharer unwittingly becomes a participant in the cultural process. Attendance at exhibitions and educational events in exhibition spaces also increases with each project, demonstrating the growing interest of audiences in new experiences and new knowledge about our culture. Volodymyr Yermolenko, Ukrainian philosopher, writer, and president of PEN Ukraine, will talk more about the role that culture plays today in Ukrainian society.
Culture is not a superstructure, it's not something that comes sometime later and is built on some foundation. Culture is the foundation itself. Culture is the society's language, it speaks to others. Culture is the face of this society. If society is faceless, then no one will recognize it. If society has no language, no one will hear it. It seems to me that now, during the war, we began to understand this in a special way, because there is such a thirst for culture, because people understand that culture is the key to our survival. That is, it is not something that comes after survival, it is not something that comes in a comfort zone. It is not something that comes when you're good. Culture is an element of resistance. It is an element of reaction, in particular to what is bad for you. Culture is a moment, an opportunity to gather forces, to build a core when you feel bad. When you've been knocked down, culture is the force that helps you get back on your feet. It seems to me that the enemy is killing us for our culture, because the enemy wants us to be no different from him. The enemy wants us to be just like him. The enemy is telling us that you are just like us. And if you don't want to be just like us, we will destroy everything that separates you from us. And how should we respond to this? We must emphasize our differences even more. The differences of our culture, the differences in how we view the world, the differences in how we treat each other, how we organize ourselves in society, what music we listen to, what texts we read, what language we speak. And this is very important because they are killing us for our language, they are killing us for our culture. And our response should be even more Ukrainian language, even more Ukrainian culture. Because it is the core around which everything else is built. This is a certain core of the personality. If you don't have a core, you fall apart as a person. And society is also falling apart. Culture is that thing, that strength, that energy, that trunk that does not allow society to collapse. That, I repeat once again, allows it, helps it stand up when it has been knocked down. Culture is not something that comes after all other problems have been solved. Culture is the first step to solving these problems. Culture is an opportunity to remember your name, to remember your history, to remember how you are called, to remember your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts that connect you with people who lived 100, 200, 300 years ago here in this land or in other lands, to feel that kinship, to feel that there is something bigger than us. There is something bigger than us as individuals. There is this language that came to us from others, which we did not invent, but which we improve, which we develop. Therefore, I would encourage thinking about culture in these terms. Culture is not a superstructure. Culture is not something that comes sometime later. Culture is where everything starts, what everything rests on.
Effective management in the field of culture is always challenging and demanding. It is especially crucial during a prolonged war when all resources are directed towards military needs and expenses must be extremely balanced. At the same time, no one doubts the importance of culture for the development and security of the country, and people are particularly eager to live and learn more about themselves and their cultural heritage. Andriy Bondar, Ukrainian poet, publicist, and translator, will share his thoughts on the dichotomy of cultural needs amidst the war.
As of the summer of 2024, the war has an ambivalent effect on the artist. At the beginning of the war, we could say that the war definitely blocks creativity and doesn't let creativity develop, does not allow even elementary focus on something, especially when it comes to something like verbal creativity, because words require special concentration, because there is increased responsibility for them during the war. That's why I don't have creativity as such. I can't write anything. As for artistic creativity, for example, it is all dead, but a different kind of creativity appears, and you begin to think in unison with the anxieties and hopes and disasters that happen to your country daily, and you cannot pass by the things that affect the absolute majority of people in your country. People who live in war have an absolutely unique experience of being immersed in the greatest danger. And the realization that you are living at their expense actually haunts you all the time. And you have to make efforts not to go crazy and also take part in some events that are important for your culture, in your opinion, and somehow you start to react to them. Now, at the backdrop of this revival of interest in Ukrainian classical literature, very interesting names are being revived. And there's a tendency to read these books, that is, to buy and read these books. A bunch of publishing houses constantly republish Підмогильний, republish Domontovich. Just look at our market and you will see how many reprints there are. And obviously, these books must be read. We must arm ourselves with our own Ukrainian knowledge, to which we must return. I think this is the right time for Ukrainian culture. That's why war also gives us such optics of life, on some kind of edge where you feel tradition differently. And at some point you have to rely on something more solid than modernity, than modern culture. Because you have to find strength in yourself. And strength is in the foundations. Strength is in resistance. Strength is in the history of resistance, in the history of intellectual resistance of Ukrainians in the 20th century. And not only in the 20th, but also in the 19th. I guess that the war does us such a favor and allows us to reevaluate a lot of things that happened to us, look for arguments, look for the foundations of our culture again, constantly prove its place. And its place is in Europe. Its place is in Europe, and many Ukrainian writers who have died in this war paid with their lives for its place in Europe. Vika Melina died, and recently we commemorated the anniversary of her death. Maxim Kravtsov, Oleg Kluvas, etc. There are a lot of names, a lot of writers at the front line. Our community has been very much affected by the war. Serhiy Zhadan has mobilized to the National Guard. Each of us can be there too, at any moment.
Ukrainians have defined their cultural mission as serving society, promoting its unification and development through the presentation of Ukrainian cultural phenomena. The starting point of this work is the realization that people in Ukraine today especially need attachment and closeness to their culture, and for many it can become a salvation and a spiritual refuge. Experiencing the beauty and greatness of our heritage, the achievements of modern artists, and the phenomena of modern culture becomes a source of pride and justified self-respect, forming an identity and helping to survive difficult times and suffering. Matviy Vaisberg, Ukrainian painter, graphic artist, and book designer, will talk about his experience as an artist in the times of war.
Wartime art, or rather art after the beginning of the full-scale invasion. If I take my own experience, then having already had the experience of 2014, sorry for the tautology, I understood that I couldn't help painting. While some artists couldn't paint at all when it all started, I was saved by it all. I started my travel diary on March 1st, I think, and I painted about a work a day. Some of my friends painted as well as I did, and some just stopped. It simply depends on the person's psychotype. But in fact, wartime art turned out to be a very powerful art. It happens in history. And the exhibitions that are shown now, including abroad and in our country, there are so many exhibitions, so many works created. It is impossible to imagine so many works made by artists as now in any other more peaceful times. And there's a huge number of really high-quality works. There are different kinds, but we'll talk about high-quality works. A huge amount of reflection on events, sometimes indirect, sometimes it's art of direct action. I even know artists who painted beautiful works while at war. Artists who painted indirectly. Artists who used some photos, streams, etc. Only time will help us evaluate this whole situation. But I'm sure that Ukrainian wartime art is a great art. It can be compared, for example, to the times of Goya or some wars when art becomes simply a means of resistance and self-sufficiency of the thinking of the people and the artists who represent it.
You've been watching a special project by Ukraine Media Center, an NGO Euro-Atlantic course dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!